An 82-year-old woman took a pair of bolt cutters and walked straight into America's most secure nuclear facility. No alarms went off. No guards showed up. The security cameras didn't catch a thing. This became the worst security breach in the history of U.S. nuclear facilities. The site is called the Y-12 National Security Complex in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Oak Ridge itself was a secret city, built out of farmland during World War II, so classified it didn't even appear on maps. Its one job was enriching the uranium that went into the Hiroshima bomb. 70 years later, it's still the heart of America's nuclear arsenal. The vault holding the core stockpile of highly enriched uranium is what the media calls the Fort Knox of uranium. It's a $500 million concrete and steel bunker, protected by 3 layers of fencing, sensors, cameras, and armed patrols running around the clock. The official line was simple: this is the hardest target in the country to break into. That was the myth. Megan Rice was the one who came to prove it wrong. She was a Catholic nun with the Society of the Holy Child Jesus. For most of her life, she taught school in Nigeria and Ghana, West Africa, for 40 years, in classrooms with dirt floors. She was small, deeply devout, wore glasses, and always had a gentle smile, the kind of person who looked like she couldn't scare off a chicken. But by the summer of 2012, she'd already been arrested dozens of times for anti-nuclear protests, convicted 4 times, and spent months in jail for demonstrating at the Nevada test site. She belonged to the Plowshares movement, named after the Bible verse about beating swords into plowshares. Its members believe nuclear weapons are an absolute evil, and the way to fight that evil isn't debate. It's walking straight up to the machine of destruction, touching it with your own hands, and accepting whatever consequences follow. She didn't believe this fortress was unbreakable. She thought it was just a stage set, an elaborate bluff made of concrete. She was willing to put her life on the line to prove it. 2 other elderly Catholic peace activists joined her. But everyone involved knew that once this got out, the whole country would be looking at one thing: an 82-year-old nun. She wasn't the point of the spear, she was the mirror. If special forces had broken in, people would just say the enemy was too skilled. But if an 80-something-year-old woman could walk right in, then the wall meant nothing. There'd be no excuse left standing. Just after 2 a.m. on the 28th of July 2012, they stepped out of the woods and stood at the first fence. A sign reading "Deadly Force Authorized" was barely visible in the glow of their flashlights, meaning anyone caught inside could be shot on sight. The bolt cutters bit down. Click. They waited, expecting the searchlights, the loudspeakers, the sound of a patrol car engine. Nothing came. So they widened the gap, climbed through, and stepped onto federal restricted land. At the second fence, the one the official brochure said was under round-the-clock surveillance. Click. Still silence. They cut through it like they were clipping a backyard hedge and kept walking, straight into the zone where, in theory, intruders would be shot on sight. Third fence. Click. Now they were standing inside the security perimeter of the highly enriched uranium storage building, just a few hundred feet from a bunker holding enough material for thousands of nuclear weapons. 3 fences, 3 cuts, and none of it stopped them. The only thing that had ever stood in their way was the wire itself. The investigation that followed laid out exactly what had gone wrong. The cameras were outdated, several had been broken for months, and repair requests just sat there, ignored. The detection equipment happened to be malfunctioning that very night. A failure at that level should have put the entire facility on lockdown. Instead, it got treated like routine maintenance trouble. To cut costs, the security contractor had already eliminated the outer patrol team. The guard post that should have covered the area outside the fences simply didn't exist anymore. But the deadliest factor was the boy who cried wolf effect. The alarms had been going off for years, set off by animals, weather, faulty sensors, false alarms every single day. The people watching the monitors had learned one lesson: ignore the alarms. That's the most dangerous way any fortress can fail. Not from being broken through by force, but from rotting from the inside first. Nothing had been officially shut off. Everyone was just pretending the system still worked. The wall was real, the guard tower was real, the shoot on sight sign was real, but the entire system that was supposed to give that wall meaning had quietly rusted away, and nobody had noticed because nobody had ever really tried to test it. They crossed the last open stretch of ground and stood at the white wall of the uranium storage building, one of the most sensitive walls in the entire country, with 3 ordinary people standing in front of it. Still, nobody came. So they set down their bags and did exactly what they'd come to do. For 2 full hours, they hung a banner. They strung up yellow crime scene tape across the concrete wall, as if they were placing the building itself under arrest. They pulled out spray paint and wrote a message on the white wall. "The fruit of justice is peace." Then came the part that hit hardest. They pulled out baby bottles filled with their own blood and poured it down the wall, dark streaks running down the concrete. Finally, they took out hammers and chipped at the corner of the bunker, knocking loose a small chunk of concrete. A frail old woman had personally chiseled a piece off a symbol of American military might. The whole time, they prayed. For 2 full hours, outside the walls of the country's highest security nuclear material storage site, 3 peace activists did whatever they wanted, and the entire fortress didn't so much as stir. The most chilling line to come out of the later investigation was this: what if it hadn't been peace activists who wanted to be seen, but a professional team that didn't? That's the exact nightmare the entire US security system exists to prevent. Every dollar spent, every wall built, all of it was supposed to stop this from ever happening. And it happened anyway, quietly, for 2 hours. 2 hours with nobody watching is enough time to map out a wall structure, plan a device, or let a trained team start handling nuclear material. This facility, supposedly the hardest place in the country to get near, couldn't even manage 2 minutes of warning. Every promise about layered defenses, buying time to respond, turned out to be empty. Finally, 2 points of light appeared in the darkness. A security vehicle rolled up, slowly. After 2 full hours, someone had finally arrived. The car stopped, and a guard named Kirk Garland got out. By the book, this should have turned into a tense standoff. Instead, the 3 activists didn't run and didn't resist. They calmly turned around and offered him bread, food they'd carried with them. Then, in the dark, they began quietly singing. Garland made the choice any decent person would make. He didn't pull a gun on singing nuns. He calmly arrested all 3 and called for backup. The break-in was over. The security contractor probably figured that once they had the 3 in custody, the problem was solved. They had no idea the real disaster was just getting started. By morning, the photos were everywhere across the country. Blood, spray-painted slogans, all over the wall of a weapons-grade uranium storage facility. The Fort Knox of uranium had been defiled, in plain view, for 2 straight hours by an 82-year-old nun. The media didn't need to exaggerate anything. The plain facts were damning enough. This was the worst security failure in the history of America's nuclear weapons complex. The fallout was seismic. Y-12 shut down completely. Core operations tied to the U.S. nuclear stockpile were suspended. The entire security force was sent back for retraining. Investigators moved into Oak Ridge. Congress held hearings. Officials had to explain, on the record, how 3 unarmed people, one of them, an elderly woman, managed to spend 2 hours next to the country's nuclear material. The 2 contractors responsible for running operations and security lost their contracts on the spot. The most ironic detail: many guards flatly refused to believe 3 people alone had pulled this off. They insisted there had to be an inside man, someone who disabled the cameras, someone who'd pulled the patrols. They couldn't accept a simpler, far scarier truth. No traitor was needed. The fortress had already failed on its own. They'd rather believe in a conspiracy than admit that the most heavily guarded site in the country had simply stopped functioning. Nobody had opened the door for them. The door had just never really been shut. What happened next made things even more infuriating. Kirk Garland, the only guard who showed up, made the arrest, and kept the situation from turning violent, was commended at first. 2 weeks later, he was fired. His own summary of it was blunt. "I stopped them, I detained them, I testified, nobody got hurt, and I'm the one who lost my job." He became the scapegoat for a failure that went far beyond him. Pinning the blame on one name was easier than admitting the whole institution had rotted. And the government's response was even worse. Facing a humiliation entirely of its own making, the authorities had 2 options: admit the fortress had failed and fix it, or throw everything at punishing the 3 people who'd exposed it. They chose the second option. The charge wasn't trespassing, it was sabotage of national defense, a serious felony reserved for wartime spies and saboteurs, carrying a sentence of decades. Prosecutors painted them as repeat, hardened offenders, as if the real threat to national security was a nun with a hammer or a fence she'd been able to walk right through. An 82-year-old woman who hadn't damaged any military equipment, hadn't hurt anyone, calmly waited to be arrested, and saying to the guard who arrested her, was now being treated as a threat to the nation, facing what could be the rest of her life behind bars. The verdict came down, guilty of sabotaging national defense. The moment the ruling was read, all three were taken into custody, denied bail, and sent straight to federal prison to await appeal. The nun who'd exposed the fortress's failure ended up locked up by the very system she'd exposed. She'd won the break-in and lost her freedom. The concrete wall hadn't held her. The legal system did. The case went to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, where everything turned around. The court threw out the sabotage conviction entirely. In his ruling, Judge Raymond Kethledge wrote one line that cut straight through the government's entire argument. Embarrassing the government isn't the same as harming national defense. The court found that no reasonable jury could conclude that three people cutting fences, praying, and hanging a banner intended to damage America's ability to defend itself. They'd embarrassed the government, they'd humiliated it, they'd exposed it, but they hadn't harmed it. Hammers, blood, and spray paint couldn't touch the country's actual defense capabilities. In plain terms, the government's own court admitted it. The nun hadn't sabotaged national defense. She'd only sabotaged the illusion that it was secure. With the sabotage conviction gone, the lengthy sentence tied to it fell apart too. The court sent the case back down, stating plainly that the 2 years they'd already served far exceeded what the remaining minor charges called for. There was no reason to keep them locked up any longer. Megan Rice walked out of prison. The government had been slapped down by its own courts, and it didn't push the fight any further. The whole story ended up as a strange little piece of theater. The state called her a saboteur, and the state's own court said all she'd really done was embarrass it.